Let us depart to go home, where we will make sweet passionate love.
Hello friends, and welcome back to ReddX, your source for the freshest daily cringe content anywhere on the internet. Promise swearsies it's just a fact and is totally science. Go ahead and look it up. Because everyone has been asking me to cover Chrischan, and I decided that I don't really have the patience to go over every single thing that Chrischan has done. I do have a lot of patience, but not that much. We're gonna try something a little different instead. We here at ReddX Industries are going to attempt to break the Chrischan full lore speedrun world record. This will cram a lot of information into our brains super fast. You can rewind the video if you missed any of these parts. The current record stands at 20 minutes, 49.03 seconds, and has unclear rules, so I'm gonna go ahead and lay some rules down for my run, and then I guess people could use it in the future or not. But the run will start with early childhood and pre-internet era Chris, and must mention at least 2 life events from both. 2. Every saga listed on the quickie, starting with 2.1, must be covered, and at least 1 major player or interaction must be explained. 3. There must be at least 1 recurring joke that I run into the ground, minimum of 3 iterations. 4. Memes do not pause the clock, nor do video clips. This all counts as part of the run. 5. Artificially speeding up the voice recording will invalidate any world record attempts. 6. Clock stops on the last sentence explaining current christory. We will consider this version 1 of christory, and any world record attempts might choose to follow version 1 playthrough or set a new record if new variations should come out. Finally, number 7, commentary before or after the video does not count towards the actual runtime of the speedrun. Post and pre-run commentary are allowed for the sake of making a complete video. So are you ready to stuff your brain with worthless knowledge? So with the rules outlined, yes, the gauntlet is thrown. Elijah, go ahead, start the clock, because we gotta go fast. Chrischan was born Christopher Weston Chandler on February 24th, 1982 to Barbara and Bob Chandler, and their childhood would take a turn for the worst when a babysitter by the name of Roach left Chris in a closet for an extended period of time, a situation that would render Chris relatively mute for a long period of time, a contrast to his originally talkative self. In 1994, during the 4th grade, while attending Nathaniel Green Elementary School, Chrischan would allegedly be pinned down by several faculty members who would proceed to record his screams. After this event, Barbara and Bob would take legal action against the school while moving to Richmond, Virginia to allow Chris to attend a different school. While it was suggested at this time that Chris might require special attention, the boomer parents would do what many parents of the 1990s did and ignore it for what can be assumed to be selfish reasons. In 1992, Christopher would become Christian when an animatronic bear mispronounced his name, and Chris would insist that he was going by the name Christian from that day on, interpreting it as a sign from God and having it legally changed afterwards. A year later, in 1993, Chris would win the Watch and Win sweepstakes surrounding a syndicated Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon, cementing his love of the character. During high school, Chris would have many girls around him that he would refer to as his gal pals, some of whom were paid by Bob Chandler to keep him company, and others who felt sorry for him. All these gal pals would eventually break ties with Chris following his 18th birthday party. During Chris's time in high school, they would create the infamous Sonichu, the thing most well known about Chrischan prior to the jail saga. This was created due to an assignment that required Chris to create an album cover using original characters, and Chris had decided that merging Pikachu and Sonic qualified as fair use. It doesn't. Chrischan would turn 18 in 2000 and held a short job at a Wendy's that they would quickly lose. Additionally, Chris would attend Piedmont, Virginia Community College, where they struggled with academia, and their love quest began in full. Most well known is Chris's attraction signs that were advertisements for a girlfriend. This sign would list many criteria, most notable of which was a boyfriend-free girlfriend. It also had many other requirements based on lifestyle and race. These would be taken down by the dean, Mary Lee Walsh, who Chrischan would confront about this and be subsequently exiled from the school, presumably for throwing some sort of epic tantrum. In 2005, Chris would befriend a woman by the name of Megan, a girl he met while being a Pokemon TCG judge at the Game Place, a local card shop. They would form a friendship that would quickly go downhill when Chrischan refused to learn the concept of personal space and would make unwanted emotional and physical advances on the young woman, who openly admitted her dislike of this, culminating in a severance of their friendship due to an event later in Christory. It should be noted that this is an example of Chris not respecting boundaries early on. In 2007, Chris Chrischan would attempt to win another contest, this one being the Chop Chop Master Onions Rap Showdown. Due to a multitude of reasons, Chrischan would lose to one Adam Stackhouse despite Chris's attempts to sway the vote through solicitation of friends and creating multiple accounts to vote for himself. After losing this, Chris would fly into a rage and began emailing threats to Adam, as Adam's win had stolen his only hope of winning the aforementioned Megan's heart, which he planned to do by taking her on the trip and giving her one of the 2 PSPs that the contest awarded. Chris then sent an angry email to Sony executives on the 3rd of August 2007 stating, "I really wanted that trip so I could have a chance to impress my sweetest Megan and possibly fulfill my dream of getting married and soon have a daughter named Crystal, yet now I, a frustrated, high-functionally autistic 25-year-old virgin, have been balls broken, like I have through a big chunk of my life in America's favorite game, Kick the Autistic. Sigh." In 2008, Chris would be banned from a local game shop called The Game Place, where he served as a judge for a Pokemon TCG. As a player, he was known to be rather annoying, either displaying homophobic or racist tendencies and singing Britney Spears songs very loudly during games. Shop manager and late owner Michael Snyder would eventually ban Chris after he screamed at an African-American child. Over several years, Chris would attempt to appeal this ban and creepily do things outside the shop, eventually culminating in the final event of this saga, which would include Barb and Chris allegedly hitting Michael with their car, an event that would land both Chris and Barb with felony charges. In 2007, due in no small part to the Something Awful forums, Chrischan would be brought front and center to an army of people who enjoyed the online escapades of weirdos. This would culminate in an Encyclopedia Dramatica article being written about Chris, which Chris would try to correct through many sock puppet accounts. During this time, trolls would find Chris very easy to manipulate and infuriate through popular trolling tactics of the time, such as calling him gay, an idea Chris, at the time, was adamantly against. During this time, trolls would upload drawings of Sonichu and Rosechu, Sonichu's female counterpart, engaging in homoerotic acts. Chris would respond by uploading his own images, including the infamous "She Came for CWC.jpg," which was a Rule 34 image, including himself and Megan. This would terminate Megan's friendship with Chris in 2008 when she became aware of the artwork. In 2008, Chrischan would encounter their first catfish troll, Blanca Weiss, who was actually 3 trolls working in tandem to catfish Chris into giving up his Sonichu medallion, a medallion made of Crayola model magic that Chris ascribed mystical properties to. Eventually, Chris would acquiesce and the medallion would be destroyed on video by the trolls. Chris, of course, would make a new one, claiming the destroyed medallion to be a forgery. Also in 2008, a man going by the alias of Jimmy Hill would begin drawing Sonichu and Rosechu comics, claiming to be the original creator. This would cause Chris to go into a rage, arguing with the Jimmy Hill account over copyright infringement. Trolls from Encyclopedia Dramatica would later go on to put a sign in Chris's front yard that read "ED Heart Jimmy Hill," a sign Chris would later destroy in a YouTube film. Jimmy Hill could be considered the first person to co-opt Chrischan's original creations for personal gain. Again, in 2008, a troll by the name of Clyde Cash would enter the fray, a man who was apparently hell-bent on destroying Chrischan due to the death of his fictional brother Ryan, who took his life when Chrischan stopped producing Sonichu comics. This is a good time to stop and mention that Chris is most well known for the creation of the Sonichu comics, mind-bendingly nonsensical autobiographical power fantasy comics drawn with all the skill of a gibbon and containing the most nonsensical plot ever put to paper. We will narrate those at some point in the future. Clyde Cash will be considered Chris's mortal enemy for quite a long time. Clyde has a lot of overlap with the upcoming events, so we could just power through this. Working in tandem with Clyde Cash in 2008, 2008 was a rough year for Chris, no? A quote-unquote girl by the name of Panda Halo would become Chris's online sweetheart after Chris broke things off with the trolls known as Blanca Weiss. This would culminate in Panda Halo allegedly being non-consensually intimate with Clyde Cash and conceiving a child due to the event. This would lead to a back and forth between the three that can best be described as, well, too complicated for even the most dramatic of telenovelas. She would later end up, quote, dying in the Australia brush fires. In 2009, Clyde Cash would pose as Shigeru Miyamoto of Nintendo fame and claimed to want to create a licensed Sonichu game in tandem with Chris. During this time, trolls would interact with the deal, allegedly sending mass emails to Miyamoto about Chris, quote, being gay. Oddly enough, Chris's parents would think that this was real as well, showing traits that can best be described as explaining a lot about Chrischan. The deal would eventually be nixed by a troll LARPing as Reggie Fils-Aimé, president of Nintendo America. In the same year, a 13-year-old boy trolling under the name Blue Spike would create 2 troll accounts, Julie and Max. Julie would become Chris's new sweetheart and would convince Chris to have long adult-themed phone calls. I repeat, this was a 13-year-old boy. Max played the heel to Chris, at one point claiming to have kidnapped the fictional Julie, which would cause Chris to try and drive from Virginia to Ohio to save her. Blue Spike's most notable trolling attempt, though, is when he hacked Chrischan's PSN account. On a live video call, he would coerce Chrischan into trying to shove his Sonichu medallion into his mud button to reclaim said PSN account. This was considered too far, and would both create a new way of trolling Chrischan and divide the trolling community. Blue Spike's successful hacking of Chrischan would lead to a new wave of similar trolling attempts. Chrischan was hacked successfully at least 2 times, and was made to perform acts on video to reclaim their account, such as humping their PlayStation 3 for 8 minutes straight.
I love PlayStation! I love PlayStation! Kill the Xbox!
During this time, Clyde Cash would convince Chrischan that he had installed a CIA-style bug in his PlayStation 3 and convince him to rip out the Wi-Fi antenna on the unit, claiming that that was the bug. During this time, Chris would pathetically try to infiltrate the trolling group and be convinced of a $9,000 bounty for the destruction of his PlayStation 3, an act that he would perform himself, but he was denied the bounty for, quote, reasons, by a troll by the name of Surfshack Tito, a troll persona created in the likeness of Tito from the Nickelodeon cartoon Rocket Power, which Chrischan apparently never saw. In 2009, a troll by the name of Love You Long Time would pretend to be a woman named Emily and coerce Chris into an IRL date, one of notable awkwardness that Chris brought their father to. This date would end in the infamous incident involving a man wearing a pickle suit taking Emily from Chris. Later, Emily would tell Chris that she was pregnant with the Pickle Man's child and living with Clyde Cash. On another occasion, the same troll would LARP as another woman, Kim Wilson, and take Chris to bars on 2 different occasions. Somehow, Chris never noticed that she was the same person as Emily. This same troll somehow convinced Chris that she was the other woman at the time as well. I guess all brunettes do look alike. That's a joke, please clap. During this period, it would be discovered that Chris regularly spoons with their mother Barb, and also had wet dreams about her. Sometimes foreshadowing is a fairly obvious meme. In the same year still, a troll under the name of Ivy would become Chrischan's newest sweetheart, resulting in some of the cringiest stuff I've ever seen on the internet. He would propose marriage to her, but in order to hurt Chris, the troll would later claim that Ivy had taken her own life. Still, in 2009, IRL friend turned troll Joshua Martinez would masquerade as pop star Vanessa Hudgens and create a short-lived online fling with Chris. Is it weird to anyone else that so many men wanted to pretend to be Chris's online girlfriend? Anyone else think that weird? Just me? Okay. This would result in a series of spine powdering videos and really not much else.
Let us depart to go home, where we will make sweet passionate love.
In the same year, still, the Quickie was formed as a place for Chris to upload their comics, but also served as a repository of Christorical information. A lot happened here, but most notable was the war between the Quickie and Asperpedia, which we will get into shortly. Still, in 2009, Chris would release a video called Rolling and Trolling where he pretended to have been faking the Chrischan character all along, walking around in a weekend warrior biker outfit. This inspired a new troll to pretend to be the real Chrischan and dubbing the actual Chrischan Ian Brandon Anderson. This would go on for a long time with them going back and forth, culminating in 2011 with a SingStar challenge for the heart of a woman named Casey. The troll would eventually become known as Liquid Chris, and it's often rarely mentioned that Liquid Chris was portrayed by 2 people. Also interestingly, the primary troll would go on to be a doctor of oncology. It's weird to imagine someone going from Chrischan troll to doctor, but I don't know, life is strange. In the same year, Alec Benson Lear would create Asperchew, who wanted to mock Chrischan, basically being an anthropomorphic Chrischan Sonichu with Asperger's syndrome. This enraged Chrischan, and in response to the rage, the Asperpedia, a site for the hosting of the Asperchew comics, would take out ads on the Quickie, causing a back and forth of using ads for trolling purposes, vandalization of both sites, and DDoS attacks. Oh, thank God. Finally, 2010! In this year, a troll by the name of Surfshack Tito would reveal the name of one of Chris's IRL gal pals referred to as the Wallflower. Other trolls would inform her of Chris's leaked emails and people knowing of her existence, causing her to distance herself from Chris, and requesting her personal information be moved from the Quickie. The admins obliged this, but Chris believed the action was performed due to their rage. Following these events, there would be a period of silence from Chrischan, lasting roughly 6 months, where there were sightings of him here and there, but not much posted online publicly. It was also during this time that the destruction of the PlayStation 3 occurred in an attempt to claim the aforementioned bounty by Surfshack Tito. There's also a video of them dancing bizarrely at an event in a rather odd outfit. Later in 2010, it would come to light that Chris had encountered an individual by the name of Jackie at a local cafe. This would be their new romantic interest. Sadly, Jackie was merely a troll, like so many others, which is weird because there are no girls on the internet, which was a popular meme around this time, but there seemed to be enough of them to troll the hell out of Chris. During this period, she would convince Chris to create videos to fulfill her kinks. This would also be the beginning of Chris identifying as a tom girl, which can best be described as a male lesbian. Yeah, I don't really get it either. An unreleased call also took place between Jackie and Chris after the death of Bob Chandler, his father, which she surprisingly never released. Before Bob's death, Chris had launched into a crazed internet tirade against the trolls, demanding apologies lest incorrect dox information get released. The dox information either being provided by the trolls or completely fabricated. Following the death of his father, Chris would go relatively internet silent, only making note during the incident at the game place where a morning Chris and Barb Chandler would strike the aforementioned game place owner with the vehicle. This would create a remarkable 3-year gap in christory, something many trolls at the time thought was impossible. Christory would begin again in full, where Chris would acquire a new love interest by the name of Catherine in 2014. Sadly, this was also a troll, as you probably guessed, and she would go on to leak a lot of information about Chris to the internet, including alluding to Chris's habit of sexual harassment that had been alluded to previously with Megan. Catherine, in her post, claims that Chris attempted to hold her hand, Chris attempted to kiss her twice, which she blew off with a sneeze. Sometimes foreshadowing is a fairly obvious meme. Also in 2014, a game called Sonic Boom would be released, in which character designers had the absolute audacity to change the color of Sonic's arm to blue without consulting Chrischan, who was now Christine. There was a series of coping and seething during this time, but the event most remember is Chris being kicked out of the GameStop that they were already banned from and macing an employee on the way out of the store. Surprising no one, the employee who was maced was not involved in the expulsion from the store. This would land Chrischan with a $500 fine and 6 months probation. In 2015, Chris would make a return to the internet at the behest of a group of trolls attempting to convince Chris that they wanted to be their managers and involve them in lesbian relations. During this period, videos of Chris's leaked sperm collection was shown, and the infamous lesbian audition tape. However, this is honestly a pretty boring part of christory. It really feels like beating a dead horse at this point. Chrischan received a ban on Facebook during the presidential election of 2016, where they were very mad about Donald Trump's anti-LGBTQ+ ideas, which is a stark contrast to the classic Chrischan who hated the gays. Chrischan threatened to kill the president on Facebook after he had won the election. In 2007, Chrischan would develop an odd fixation with Doopy-Doo over.
You talk directly to me. Do you understand?
An animator for the Planet Dolan YouTube channel. This would result in Chris trying to make her one of their gal pals and eventually crossing a line with the artist, resulting in her leaking private correspondences with Chrischan to the Kiwi Farms and publicly decrying Chrischan as a creep. After getting over the crushing blow delivered by Doopy-Doo over, a former defender of Chris, Jessica Quinn, would turn troll. She would start a small online relationship with Chris and then make them cry. That's it. It's actually a pretty boring moment in christory. Again, the rage videos are typical fare for Chrischan. Moving on. Now, if you know anything about the absolute accelerationism of Chris's insanity towards the end of their time on the internet, you know that it gets really weird, as does Chris's psychology, which can mostly be blamed on the idea guys, a group of trolls who convinced Chrischan of most of their crazy beliefs at the time. This included major changes to the Sonic 2 comics, such as the addition of concentration camps. This also included convincing Chrischan that they were in a polyamorous marriage with Magi-chan and Cries El Rochu, the concept of the dimensional merge, and a whole bunch of other stuff. A few former trolls, one of whom was Null, the owner of Kiwi Farms, was able to get Chris away from the idea guys, but they would never be able to undo the damage they did to Chris's already overly escapist imagination. Most of this occurred during 2017. In 2018, a comic artist by the name of Brian Shickley would create a Chrischan prequel comic, a project Chris had agreed to. Unsurprisingly, this would be short-lived, as Chrischan had quickly acquired a crush on the artist and began getting very creepy and needy with that individual. Put up another tally on that creepo meter. In 2018, Null of the Kiwi Farms and another person known as the Captain would step in and form a group called the Guard Dogs, volunteering to filter Chris's emails and Twitter to prevent trolls from accessing Chrischan. They would additionally hire some people to follow Chris around and keep an eye on them during BronyCon 2018. The Guard Dogs would eventually lose interest as Chrischan became more and more delusional over time, declining most of the good advice and support that they did offer. Still reeling from the delusions fed to them by the idea guys, Chrischan would find another group that we'll call TTS for monetization purposes. This group would feed into Chris's ideas about dimensional merges, OCs being real, and a whole slew of other nonsense that the already brain-rotted Chrischan would grasp onto. Later members of the group would be doxxed by an unnamed person, which would seem to distance Chris from the group, again, though the damage was already done. As the run of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic came to an end, a new series would come out, and this would cause Christine to go full Sonic Boom rage. Once again, showing the amount of rage in this individual.
Tell me why I'm stuck as a virgin with rage.
Christine would express strong feelings about this new iteration of MLP being responsible for world catastrophes. Between 2019 and 2020, Chris would encounter someone almost as messed up as them, and that is one Jacob Sockness. Jacob and Chris would combine their weird ideas to further the lore of the dimensional merge, eventually culminating in more or less what Chris believes today, give or take a messiah or two. Jacob would prove to be a somewhat dangerous individual, though. After Chris rebuked their desires to be romantically involved with them, Jacob would attempt to take a train to Virginia to violently attend to Chris, and that would only be stopped by members of the Watchmen/Watchdogs, catching them at the train station in Chicago and convincing them to turn back. In 2018, oh god, we're going backwards, a YouTuber by the name of Coppets would be involved in filming Chrischan going about their business, such as ghost hunting and conducting several interviews. This would lead the way to the Gamer from Mars, another YouTuber making a 4-part series about Chrischan. You should go watch those Gamer from Mars YouTube videos. And go down in the comments too and say that ReddX sent you. Thanks so much. For some reason, a series of people would begin to block Chrischan on Twitter between 2018 and 2020, which would create a minor blind spot in christory, as Chris would cope and seethe about being blocked and then go dark for periods of time, breaking their silence only to talk about the dimensional merge occasionally. Between 2018 and 2020, Chris would come up against another artist attempting to capitalize on Chris's OC, and at first it began somewhat cordially, but as Ben Saint and Chris interacted more and more, this would inevitably descend into another complete meltdown, with several white knights coming out to admonish Ben Saint and prop up Chris. During this time, Chris would also create an incomprehensible card game that can best be described as what would happen if Satan designed a card game to torture people while on 12 pounds of LSD. We've covered the Watchmen already to some degree, but it should be known that this group broke down, as many groups attempting to protect Christine do. This often due to infighting and doxing, and a new group would be formed, the Knights of CWC, and this group would contain the infamous Isabella Janke and the Sultress, one a troll wishing to be Chris's downfall, and another an actual woman who wanted to be with Chris. Chris would meet them IRL at an MLP convention and form a quick friendship with both. You're gonna want to remember this event. For a while during this period, a second group known as Praetor would help Chris monetize the Sonichu brand through an Etsy store. This group would come head to head with the Watchmen. It would appear that the Watchmen had taken some chagrin with the actions of Praetor, and this would culminate in a call that is unknown to the general public outside of an out-of-context excerpt. The more I go down this rabbit hole, the more I just wonder what the hell any of these people are doing. Why are you all treating Chris like property? Just leave him alone! In 2021, a self-published book by Don Lachaume, a fan of Chrischan, would compare the works of Chrischan to Andy Warhol, which was an ego boost that was deeply unrequired around this time. Lachaume would have several conversations with Chris in this time and claim they were a polite and attentive individual. Probably one of the few people to ever say that about Chris. Here it is, the darkest part of Christory. In July of 2021, due to information acquired by Null and information leaked by Isabella Janke, it would become clear that Chris had decided to take out their virgin rage on their very own mother. This would result in them being expelled from the house and taking up lodging in a crappy hotel. Moments before Chris's arrest, internet nothing burger Ethan Oliver Ralph would arrive to catch the arrest on camera in what is probably the weirdest internet crossover in history. Chrischan would have several court appearances after the arrest, one infamous one involving them having an outburst in court demanding access to their toys and art supplies. This period would also involve a series of letters into and out of jail to trolls and fans alike. Some of these letters would have Chris asserting that they were Jesus Christ. God, those poor prison shrinks. Eventually, Chris would be deferred from prison and put on probation after being found mentally unfit for trial. I can only assume that the Chewbacca defense was used. And now, with Chrischan out on probation, a series of sightings have occurred, including one at a Walmart and one at a game shop. Several dubious Reddit accounts have claimed to have interacted with Chrischan in this time, but few have the evidence to support this claim. Only time will tell what letting Chrischan get away with it will hold. He can't keep getting away with it! But hopefully they will find a way to become a truly useful member of society. The clock has stopped, how do we do? Oh my god, that's cutting it really close. I guess I can break these down more in depth if you want. Overall, I do feel really bad for Chrischan. He never got the help that he deserved, kind of set up for failure. And once the entire internet gets turned loose against a person like that, I mean, he didn't stand a chance. I admire the work that people try to do in protecting Chrischan, but I'm not sure that you're honestly not just making it worse. You know what I'm saying? The Isabella Jank, whatever, situation would make a horrifying video all on its own. I'm happy to expand on any of these things. Let me know what you'd like to see in the comments. Sonichu comics coming up soon. I hope you stay attended for that. If you like some other bad fanfiction videos, there's a playlist for you right here for My Immortal. Always remember, friends, that you are loved, you are worthy, you definitely deserve it, and I shall see you in the next one. So until then, bye-bye.
It's only worth it if you work for it. I won't stop till they hear me now. I won't stop till I wear the crown.